as bad as 2022 may have felt to you and me, for the dictators of the world, the year has been worse. Lots of headaches. Lots of headaches piling up for Xi in China, for the Ayatollahs of Iran, and for Mr. Putin too. This summer, back in May, we held an event in Warsaw just as the scope of Ukrainian resilience and resistance had come into focus. And our old friend Marian Zablotsky, who's here tonight, one of the founders of one of our first partners in Ukraine and now a member of parliament, he sounded Churchillian when he came to an Atlas Network podium and he said, Putin's mistake was to send slaves to conquer free people. And I'm just tremendously proud of people in this room and what they've done to help our friends in Ukraine who have reciprocated by inspiring us. And for me, this is really the revelation of the year. This community that Atlas Network gets to convene is dedicated to long-term educational efforts, long-term policy reform efforts. And the team at Atlas Network headquarters keeps focused on training, on grant competitions, on events like this that help inspire and inform people to do more for liberty. But we've learned these last months that our community is more than that. Our community can flex during emergencies and use our resources to save lives. And I'm especially proud of one member of our team who spent the better part of this past year going back and forth across the border of Ukraine to coordinate efforts among our friends inside the country and, of course, around the world. Let's bring him to the stage right now. I'm going to ask you to help me welcome Atlas Network's Executive Vice President, Dr. Tom G. Palmer.
You are not alone. It's a phrase that we take seriously at Atlas Network. Whether you're working in Oregon or Amazonia, Lithuania or Ghana, China or Morocco, Afghanistan or Ukraine, you are not alone because you are important members of Atlas Network's network. We share ideas and strategies, tips and tactics, but throughout all that, we share our commitment to our principles, to our values, and to each other. We make that true, not just by saying it, but by acting on it. That can be everyday and mundane, like answering a query about how do you do that from a staff member of a partner group halfway around the globe, or writing letters of recommendation for scholarships and jobs or opportunities for promising younger colleagues, or it can be dramatic and difficult, as when our Afghan partners were in danger, and members of Atlas Network's team worked tirelessly, that is to say, without sleep for days on end, to help them to escape, to tell them that we were working on their behalf, and to just let them know that their friends loved them and cared about them. When the dictatorship in Moscow began to amass troops around the borders of Ukraine in November of last year, I was among those who thought it would probably be another act of intimidation as previous military maneuvers in Belarus and Western Russia had been, and not a major escalation of the war that the Kremlin started in 2014 and it kept on a low burn ever since. It was our colleague Patty Holbein who began to sound the alarm about our upcoming Europe Liberty Forum, which is scheduled for Kyiv. As the numbers of troops and tanks and artillery grew, it was becoming clear that Patty was right. I was at the time on a trip to Dubai and Turkey and Israel in the weeks before February 24th invasion, and after a very intense evening of meetings in Turkey, I woke up feeling a bit of a scratchy throat. This may be familiar to many of you. And I told our friend Medini Sungur, who was coming to pick me up, perhaps we should get all masked up and roll down the windows because I wanted to get tested. And big surprise, it was COVID. I did manage to complete the Atlas Network Academy video in a huge room with frigid air blowing in from all the open windows. And the videographer, who had just recovered from COVID, masked and about 15 feet away from me. But then off I went to quarantine. So anyway, I was stuck in a hotel room as the war ramped up. But thanks to the initiative of our colleagues, Ellen Saakashvili, Chad Goody, Brad Lips, and others, we assembled a global Zoom call 2 days after nearly 200,000 Russian soldiers invaded Ukraine. Natalia Melnik of the Bentukidze Free Market Center, Daniil Lupkin, of Ukrainian Students for Freedom, and Mikhailo Lavrovsky from the Institute of Economic Leadership joined me at over 360 people, our supporters, partners, and friends from around the world, and a very serious talk about what was happening and what to do about it. Thanks to Ellen's forward thinking, we created the Ukraine Freedom Fund and raised quite a pot of money for the cause of Ukrainian life and liberty. We wanted to make sure that we were there to help our Ukrainian friends to save lives from what we expected to be and what turned out to be a truly savage and genocidal assault. We also wanted to make sure that the remarkable liberty movement that had grown in Ukraine after 2014 was not itself a casualty of the invasion. Revival and recovery without liberty, without limited government, and without free enterprise would be impossible, as well as empty. Our partners and friends are committed not only to an independent and free Ukraine, but to a Ukraine of independent and free people. So we tapped people from partner organizations and all of our personal networks and friendly organizations and people you met on airplanes and anybody. And it was just awesome how people leapt into the fray to help people. As soon as I got my negative test result, I dashed out with Medini to a sporting goods store and bought heavy boots and a coat and a hat and gloves and long underwear because Ukraine is extremely cold in February. That's a little warning if you go to Ukraine in February. And on March 1st, I was in the air to Warsaw, where I had meetings set up with Mikołaj Pisarski, Marek Tatawa, Tomek Kobudzuchek, Marcin Nowacki, and others. And that night, I got to visit with Tomek some of the entrepreneurs, the unusual entrepreneurs in Poland's cannabis movement, as they call it. And these are people who know how to find supplies. And they were already starting to manufacture body armor for unarmored and hence vulnerable ambulance drivers and rescue workers and firefighters and medics. I remember a discussion with one such cannabis entrepreneur when we were discussing helmets, and he said, I know a guy. And pretty quickly, helmets for medics were found and were driven by volunteers over the border. What was so uplifting was that so many people from so many different walks of life worked together. What they shared was a love of liberty. Regular churchgoers worked in makeshift factories and assembly points with teenage tattooed goths, cannabis activists, to take various groups whose paths might not normally cross that often. But those paths did cross because they shared a love of liberty and the mutual trust that comes in that phrase that we express, "You are not alone." So volunteers came from around Canada and further afield, even the wilds of remotest Canada, from all over Europe, from South America, from Asia, to drive beat-up old cars stuffed with humanitarian supplies across the border, and then to return with vulnerable moms and kids, elderly people, and the disabled. Within Ukraine, all of our partners work to identify humanitarian needs on the ground, as well as what it would take to keep the Liberty Movement contributing to a positive future for Ukraine. Our Institute Relations team did a really impressive job keeping up with both. And our development team worked to provide our donors with the opportunity to help our partners. It's been a team effort through and through. And as a result, thousands and thousands of lives have been saved, and liberty remains. I could mention the fleet of armored ambulances that we, and when I say we, I mean a whole bunch of people working together, managed to get from the United Kingdom to our medical teams in Ukraine. I got to tell you, I didn't think buying armored ambulances would ever be on my CV, but we did it. But also the tourniquets, thousands of tourniquets that were packed and brought to the Europe Liberty Forum, life-saving medical equipment, field hospitals, antibiotics and surgical anesthesia that we sourced in India, and so much, much more. But none of those needs would have been identified, funded, and met without the trust that we've all worked so long to build. You are not alone. It's what motivates our business model of coach, compete, and celebrate. We do all those things because we care about the liberty of other people. And we don't just say it, we show it. If liberty is to be in the future of the human species, it will be because those who believe in liberty now and in centuries to come will know that they are not alone. We should be proud, friends and colleagues, of what we have achieved, and we should be eager to see what we can do in future.